As a creative aspect, TV is one of the best things that we do as a species. Along with music and film and books, they bring out the best creative of all of us. They entertain and they bring so much joy to many. They invoke emotion and enable us to feel things that we bury sometimes deep down. That's what this podcast is for. Welcome to A Million Little TV Shows. This is what I call the breakdown while I break down. Each week I will go through a different TV show, a different season of that TV show, and different episodes of that show. And I will break down not only emotions, but I will break down stories from my life, and let you know why these TV shows mean so much to me, and why I believe that they are some of the most important shows out there. This podcast is here to highlight a lot of smaller TV shows, or TV shows that don't really get a platform, because we know of a bunch of TV shows that get a multitude of different podcasts. Ted Lasso, Game of Thrones, The Office, they've all got several podcasts out there analysing all types of different things. But there's not many out there for the little guy, and that's what I'm trying to highlight. So each week I will go through a different show, different seasons, different episodes, and I will go across all different kinds of genres and different countries to bring you what I believe is some of the best TV out there. So I'm glad you're here with me. I'm glad you're here for this journey. And if you've watched the shows before and you wanted to come here and get an analysis on them and have someone go through them and pick out bits that you might have enjoyed, then I'm glad you are here. If, however, you have never watched the show and you just want to come and have someone talk in your ear about different TV shows, I'm glad you are here. But I hope that it inspires some people to go and seek out these TV shows. They deserve to be watched. They were made with love and care, and they are the same as this podcast, made with love and care. I am your host, Mike, and I will take you through every adventure, every horror, every piece of drama, and I hope that you enjoy the show. Hello there, and welcome back to this A Million Little TV Shows podcast. This is now episode 9 of season 11, and today we're going to be going back to that incredible show, Mindhunter, and just reliving how good that show was and how we do desperately need a season 3. So someone needs to pull a finger out their arse and fucking do it, because this show was incredible when it came out and still holds up, still is just as good. And I've loved going through the first season and seeing all these incredible performances of these actors that are playing these incredibly fucked up people. I genuinely can't think of a word other than fucked up, because they are essentially serial killers. That is the profile of them, and you know, they have a fucked up history and they have a bad background and all sorts of stuff, but you learn how the profiling technique came about from this show. I think it's an important thing to actually understand. And it's obviously helped law enforcement worldwide as to what to look for when it comes to these types of people. So I'm really excited to get into this episode, and obviously this is going to be the last season of Mindhunter. As I said, there is no season 3, unfortunately. Yeah, anyway, I'm still hoping for this and Hannibal. But yeah, let's just get into it, because this is phenomenal. So, this is Mindhunter, Season 2, Episodes 1 to 3. So let's have a quick catch-up before we get into the actual episode. So, last season we had Holden Ford and Bill Tench, who were from the Behavioural Science Unit, which has been set up for them so that they can actually go out and profile serial killers. And obviously be able to distribute that to certain forces, local forces, so that if they spot any of these attributes in people, before they actually start an actual murder spree, these people will be profiled and hopefully found before anything too bad can happen. And this includes going into prisons and actually talking to people like Ed Kemper, who they're interviewing and is providing them with his background, evidence of why he did the things that he did, and they're sort of getting an actual real picture of what it is to be a serial killer. The person that they really want to interview is Charles Manson, because obviously he didn't kill anyone, but he is a fascinating subject when it comes to what happened. But throughout the episodes we keep seeing an ADT serviceman who is working on houses, and it seems like he is stalking victims as well. So we're unsure who this guy is at the minute, unless we obviously know a lot about serial killers. We don't know who this is yet. But at the minute, this team of Ford and Tench are actually working together with Wendy Carr to profile serial killers. So at the end of last season, we saw that Ford had actually gone over to meet with Ed Kemper, who was in hospital because he tried to commit suicide, and it was all in an effort to actually bring Ford to him. When Ford gets there, Kemper tries to intimidate him, which he does very successfully, and Ford ends up running out into the hallway and having a massive anxiety attack. And so I believe that's where we're going to pick up from. Episode 1. Now, there are no titles, so Episode 1. And Mindhunter comes back with an absolute opener. Like, fucking hell. So the ADT man is at home, his wife walks in, she hears a rattling coming from the bathroom, and as she walks towards it, she's wondering what the hell is going on. She opens the door, and this guy falls forward, and then she realises not only was he attached to the door handle and had a noose around his neck, he's also masturbating while in her night garments, lingerie, whatever you want to say. And so she runs out screaming. Let's not forget, I believe it's the 70s that were the era we're in, so that kind of thing isn't prevalent. And I mean, you'd be pretty freaked out in 2025, but nothing like way back when, 50 years ago. And so he runs after her, but never catches up to her. And so we see how much of a dark turn he's taking. I mean, well, he's been killing people, so he's pretty fucking dark anyway. And from what we've seen from the last episode where he was burning photos and burning pictures that he'd drawn of torturing people and killing people, it's a pretty sick dude. And then we go back to our main cast. Bill, it seems, is oblivious to what happened to Holden in the last episode because he is just having a barbecue, Holden isn't there, and he just seems to be having a normal, sunny weekend with no real concerns. And, you know, like I said, I don't think he knows what's happened to Holden at this point. And then we see where Holden is. Holden not only has had this panic attack, but he's now strapped to a gurney, and when he wakes up, a bunch of people rush in on him and try and hold him down. I mean, he's strapped down anyway, but they try and sedate him and make sure that he is safe. And it still looks like he is actually in the prison hospital that he was in before. So he's in pretty bad shape, and nobody has called anybody that he works with, which may end up being a good thing in the end. Because when Bill gets to work, he finds out that their former director, Shepard, is actually going to be leaving. He's told everyone that he's retiring, and he's just had enough after 27 years. He's going to be handing over to his deputy director, a guy called Ted Gunn. Bill sits down with Ted, which I've just realised that is rather funny. Bill and Ted sit down, and they actually have a positive meeting. It seems that this guy is going to be very pro BSU, Behavioural Science Unit, and that he wants to make sure that they have the best possible start, and that going forward, this is something that people really start to take seriously. He also thinks that Holden is the star of the show and wants to make sure that Bill keeps an eye on him, but also doesn't make sure that he stifles him too much. Because, I mean, the thing about Holden is he's definitely out there in his thinking, and he will get more from these people, but he also needs to be reined in sometimes, so that they're not getting in trouble. And so, for instance, the OPR, who were coming in to actually do an inquiry on the last season, because as we'll remember, Holden actually got one of his team members to doctor some tapes of an interview, and it ended up with an internal investigation. So that's what the OPR were doing. They were going to come in, they were going to make sure that everything was running correctly, and just make sure that there was nothing untoward going on. So Ted just doesn't want that kind of thing to happen, but everything else is kind of up for grabs. But when he asks where Holden is, he says, oh, I've given him the weekend off, and we will talk on Monday. When Ted actually speaks to Wendy, he tells her exactly the same thing, that he's optimistic about what's going to happen going forward, but also he needs to make sure that she keeps Holden on a leash, but lets it loose every now and again. So it seems like both Bill and Wendy are going to be Holden's babysitters. It's then that Bill, who is worried about where the hell Holden is because he hasn't seen him for the last few days, gets a phone call. It's from Holden. He tells him where he is, he tells him what happened, and Bill now has to fly out to California to go and meet him. He goes in, he gets Holden out of this prison hospital, and Holden is told to cut out as much stress as possible because that is what's causing these panic attacks. He's also told not to do the thing that he was doing when it actually happened, which obviously last time we saw him, it was the fact that Ed Kemper had hugged him, and it freaked Holden out so much that his body just couldn't take it. He had a fight or flight response, and his body just shut down. So that's going to be one thing that they're going to have to now worry about when it comes to Holden, whether he actually ends up going into these interviews and that then takes over again and he collapses. So it's something that he's going to have to start managing, which is pointed out to him later on in the episode by Wendy. He obviously has to come clean to her and tell her what happened, and when he does, she tells him that. Just be careful when you're in these interviews that doesn't happen again. It also means that he can't be conducting his own personal interviews the way that he has been or tried to with Ed Kemper. He can't just go out to California and do his own thing. He will have to be with Wendy or Bill at all times. When he gets back to Baltimore, he goes and speaks to Ted. While he's there, basically everything goes hunky-dory. Ted absolutely loves this guy. He thinks that he is the future of the FBI and makes sure that he knows that he has got all the support that he needs. Of course, there is still the OPR investigation on them at this point, and when Holden goes back downstairs and speaks to his team, he obviously speaks with Agent Smith as well. Now, Agent Smith, if you don't remember, is the agent who came into the division with high hopes for it, but also he was kind of the leak. Well, he was the leak. Holden had obviously got him to doctor this transcript that he'd been writing, and Agent Smith actually sent the correct tape in, the undoctored tape, to the OPR, and they started their investigation into Holden and the rest of the team. And so when Holden confronts his team about it, he obviously says, well, Wendy wouldn't have done it, she believes in this. Bill wouldn't have done it because he believes in this. And I certainly wouldn't have done it because I'm the only one who knows that it really happened. Apart from the person that I told to type up the notes, and that was you. And just as they're about to get into it over this whole thing, Ted comes in to visit the team. He looks at what's been going on, he looks at the casework they've got coming, and he compliments them on it. He tells them that they need to escalate their timeline. They need to make sure that they get over the line quicker with what they're doing, because things need to be stepped up now. This isn't a game where they can just wait 2 years and gather as much information as possible. They need to do it as soon as possible. And so they say, well, we need more manpower. We need a bigger office. And Ted knows exactly where to take them, but also who to hire. So he's already on it. Like I've said, he believes in this division, he knows that this can be the future, and he knows that this can go well for them, but he's going to have to put in some hard yards as well to make sure they get over the line. He takes them, shows them a new office, and everyone seems pretty happy with the progress that's going on. They know that they're getting the backing of their boss, which is always good, but then we find out why he is backing them so much. Because it seems if it wasn't for them, he wouldn't be having this job, wouldn't have this opportunity. Because eventually when they go to Shepard's retirement due, both Bill and Holden end up giving a speech. Now, when Holden gives his speech, former director Shepard looks pissed, like visibly pissed off with all of this. And later on, when Holden tries to confront him and ask him what the hell's going on and if he's okay, and he doesn't seem to be okay, the guy says, do you really think you are that fucking good? You are that arrogant that you can't see what's going on here? I'm not retiring. I've been canned because of you. Someone had to take the fall for your mess, and it's going to be me. So now someone else has my job because you fucked up. And now you're not my mess to clear up, but now I have no messes to clear up because I'm fired. I'm gone. It was basically an involuntary retirement. And when Holden realizes that his effect has actually cost someone their job, once again, the panic attacks come and he has to get away from the situation. But where they are, he can only get as far as the car park before he collapses and has to take a Valium to try and just calm himself down. So it seems that from the one massive panic attack that he had, which ended up being continuous panic attacks over the next few days, this is now going to be a permanent feature for him. And so this season is going to be a litany of these things, and it's going to be interesting what happens when he's met with an actual serial killer again. They've also been rumoured to be getting Charles Manson, so it's going to be even more interesting when he goes up against someone who never actually killed anyone but was so influential on other people that he managed to get a cult of people to kill for him. So it's going to be a very interesting series. Episode 2. So we start with the ADT man again. This time he's still living with his wife by the looks of things, but she has kicked him onto the couch. And while she has, she's also bought some literature about sexual deviancy and how to treat it. So we can imagine how well that's going to go. But for now, it seems that he is being reined in. But in the last episode, we actually saw Bill Tench get handed a bunch of files for BTK, which stands for Bind, Torture, Kill, who is a prevalent serial killer in and around Kansas. Let's not forget where the ADT man is from, so we can only suspect that it is potentially him that they are looking for. Bill goes to Kansas and he meets with the officer that was on the case in the last few years. Now, the evidence has gone cold on this guy and they are really in a bind when it actually comes to finding this guy. But he says he wants to help in any way that he can and give as much evidence as he can so that they can profile him and find him eventually. Bill wants to go to all the houses where these crimes are committed, and when he gets there he gets a brief rundown of each crime that happened, including some horrendous stuff that I don't want to talk about here because it's quite graphic and really rough going, but know that this guy was, well, he was called BTK, Bind, Torture, Kill, so you don't even have to imagine how bad things were. But this guy didn't seem to discriminate from kids, parents, young, old, whatever they were. He was just willing to get in there and do his thing, and he seems not to go with the normal sort of patterns that usual serial killers go along with. Generally, they like a certain type of person or a certain type of location or whatever it is, whereas this guy is killing indiscriminately. This guy who's been on the case tells Bill of one person, Kevin, who actually managed to get away from BTK, but he didn't get away without injury. Turns out this kid took 3 bullets in the face when BTK came after them, being him and his sister. And so Bill asks if he could meet this guy, but this guy is incredibly shy. Plus, he doesn't want people to see his face. Plus, he's terrified. He is terrified of living in the area where he lives because he doesn't know if BTK is ever going to find him. There is potential. He could be anyone. He could be on any street corner, and this guy knows what BTK looks like as well. So he fears for his life while he's in Kansas. But at this point, he's not moved anywhere yet. So when he ends up talking to Bill, Bill can't even look at this kid because this kid won't allow it. Bill manages to ask an innumerate amount of questions, like really in-depth questions about who this person was, what kind of things that they did, the whole story, the whole shebang of what actually happened, whether they were wearing clean clothes or whether they were wearing like boiler suits or whatever it was. Just any sort of question that Bill could think of, he asked to try and find out who this person was. So eventually, once this kid gives his case to Bill, Bill has to fly home. And when he gets back home, he actually has to start thinking about who this person could be. He's got one of those string boards put up and he is literally trying to dissect the case bit by bit, because Bill now knows how easy it is for people to forget themselves, because he sees it when he gets home from his trip. He walks into the house, he sees that the back door is open, and he realizes that anyone could just walk in. Anyone could be in the house at that point. His family aren't safe because of people like the BTK killer who haven't been caught at this point. So he is now a little bit more on edge than he was prior to this. Hearing about this person who kills indiscriminately and just will do anything to get his kicks. He's almost been caught on several occasions but has managed to just get away. And of course, as soon as Holden finds out what he's doing, he wants in. They go and they sit and they talk about the case, and they talk about people like David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, as well as many other serial killers. And it seems like this guy is basically mimicking these people. People like Son of Sam, people like Jack the Ripper, people who wrote letters to the press or wrote letters to police to goad them, to try and make them come out and search for him. And that is now what the BTK killer is doing. He is literally goading the police, come find me, thinking that he is smarter than them and trying to make sure that he is always one step ahead, or at least one step ahead. But since David Berkowitz has been talked about, they go and speak to Wendy. They say that they need to push David Berkowitz's interview forward so that they can go and meet with this guy, and they can basically say, you've got a copycat. What can you tell us about your method? What can you tell us that will help us in our search for this guy? Berkowitz is never getting out, so he might as well just talk to the cops. Once again, all these serial killers aren't going anywhere. They've just got stories to tell. And after last season, when Holden actually met with some of these guys and you could see the stories that they were coming out with were a bit fanciful, he started to learn and interpret what they're actually saying. So when Berkowitz goes down the whole route of, well, I was possessed. A demon inside me, a 3,000-year-old demon inside me, came out. And I was possessed and I went after these people and I did this day after day. Eventually Holden calls him out on it and says, this is all bullshit. Like, you may have convinced a psychiatrist about this, but this is stupid. Why are you saying all this stuff? It's not even true. There is no 3,000-year-old demon inside you. It's just you. And this is where David Berkowitz, for the first time, actually says, yeah, you're right. It was all me. He confesses to everything. He confesses to convincing people that he was the killer that he was. And he tells them, look, for something like this, you would have to be there every night, going out day after day, doing all the things, making sure that you staked these places out, staked these people out, and went after them, took them out. You can't just go into this sloppy, otherwise you will get caught. And if this guy is as good as you think he is, then that is what he is doing. And of course, at this point, Holden and Bill haven't actually thought about what it would undertake to do all of these sort of crimes. It would take a lot of planning, a lot of thinking about what you're going to do, where you're going to strike, and how you're going to do it. And especially when Berkowitz tells them, look, you wouldn't even be able to have a job to do this, especially at that level. But of course, we know that they can, because BDK is an ADT man. He is an alarm systems man. And so he is able to get into places where he really wouldn't normally. He's able to stake these places out. He's able to go over, and he's able to do a normal day job because he's just out on call. So technically he can have a day job while he is doing these things. And now it seems that he has outsmarted even the criminal that he is being the copycat for. Wendy, of course, is concerned about Holden because after his episode in the last season, she wants to make sure that he is okay. Bill says, look, at first he was a bit shaky, but once he got into it, he was his same cocky self. And so it proves that although he has had problems and probably will have problems again, it's not going to just be interviewing these people that is going to trigger it. It may just be when he sees Kemper or he's in a highly tense situation like he was with his old boss. But once he's in that room and he knows that he's safe, it doesn't seem to come on. That night, back at Bill's house, he gets a knock at the door and there is a cop standing there. He tells them that there has been a situation in the area where one of the houses that his wife has been showing, she's a realtor, has been invaded, and there has been a body found in the garage. This guy seems really shook up by it, and Bill starts to talk about the case. Obviously, it's an ongoing case. Even though he is FBI, he can't really discuss it, especially when he's in the domestic home of the FBI agent. So he politely declines, but Bill still offers to help if there is anything that he needs him to do. But now Bill knows that even in his own area, even where his wife works, there is potential out there for something bad to happen. And now it's right on his doorstep. Episode 3. So, once again, we see our ADT man, who we now know as probably the BTK killer. Sat in a library and he is just sketching and doodling. But what he's sketching and doodling is vile, like horrible. It looks like he's taken pictures from the scenes that he's been at and he's now sketching them out by using tracing paper so that he can send them off to the police or to the press, wherever he's going to send them. However, now that he is in trouble with his wife, I think that's why he is sat in a library. But he almost gets caught when the librarian comes over and tells him that it's time to pack up. So it seems like he is getting more and more bold as he is going along. When he's doing things like this in a public arena, it's not exactly a good idea. But again, that might be part of the excitement for him. Thinks he can get away with stuff now. Thinks that he is becoming immortal. And then we see Bill. Bill is wandering around his house and he finds Nancy sat at the table. His wife, Nancy. She is not in a good way after the news of what happened. She also knows that her name and number is above the actual for sale sign on this house, and she asks Bill if he'll go over in the morning and have a chat with the detective that's there and just see if they're allowed to take it down. They shouldn't need it at the end of the day, but Nancy just wants her name taken away from this whole thing, and especially when it's got their private number on it. Bill agrees and he heads over the next morning. When he speaks to this guy, this cop is still shaken by what he's seen, and when we find out what it was that he saw, I think you would be too. Because he asks for Bill's help on this. He asks him to come to the basement, and when he does, you see an outline. And even just the outline of it is stomach churning, it's shocking. But what you see is the chalk outline of a crucifix, and the crucifix is only big enough for a child. And so straight away, speculation between the two of them is rife. Is this some sort of cult activity? Why would anyone do anything like this? What is the purpose of killing a child in that way? And why a child? Why anyone? Bill believes that it's not anything to do with cult behaviour because it would be a lot more in-depth than what it actually is. It doesn't seem to have any candles around there. There's no symbology around it. It's just a child on a cross, which is horrific, but doesn't speak to any ritualistic behaviour. But because of everything that's gone on, Bill has told Holden that he can't actually come with him where they're going. They were meant to be going out to Atlanta, but Bill says that he can't go. Now, like I've said, their boss, Ted Gunn, has told them, look, I need you to watch Holden, make sure that he is okay, and make sure that he doesn't get into too much trouble. But straight away, Bill is like, well, my wife needs me more, so he decides to pick his wife, which is the obvious choice when it comes down to this. But Holden doesn't know that he is being watched or babysat, so he basically thinks that he can just go on his own, which Bill doesn't actually go against, he just lets him. But now Bill is basically in this thing. So towards the end of the episode, so Bill has technically been MIA when it comes to being out in the field. Wendy asks if it was a smart idea for him to let Holden go on his own, but it is what it is now. Holden's already gone, and he's doing his thing in Atlanta. They'll find out the results to the back end of the episode, and hopefully there won't be any incidences there. There shouldn't be. The two people that he's gone to interview shouldn't be that taxing for him. But because of this murder in his neighbourhood and the way that it was framed, Bill is now having to answer questions from his local church. When he goes over to the church and is actually confronted by the congregants there, they begin to ask all manner of questions about what actually happened. For instance, was it ritualistic? For instance, was it a cult? All that kind of stuff. The questions that he basically has already answered. And he stands up and he says, you've got to give local PD time to have a look into this. This isn't an open and shut case. We can't definitively say what is going on. And the police involved cannot just come out and tell you everything that's happening right now. We need to make sure we're getting this right and not just giving out information that could be harmful to the case. And it seems once they see that the FBI has been involved in this, local people around the area just start to rein things in a bit. They know that they've got someone who understands all of this on the case, and therefore they're happy to just let them do their jobs, which is obviously important in such a high-profile case. And so we go back to Holden. Holden is now headed out to Atlanta. He meets up with a guy called Jim Barney, who we've seen from a previous episode. He was someone who came in for interviews, and instead the job ended up going to Greg Smith, or Agent Smith. But while he's in Atlanta, Holden is going to be interviewing William Jr. Pierce and William Henry Hance. Now, throughout the interviews, Holden seems distant. He really doesn't seem engaged with any of it. And the reason for that is because both of these people seem to be very inarticulate. Pierce essentially thinks that he's the smartest guy in the room and keeps using words that don't actually mean what he thinks they mean. And Hance doesn't seem very well educated at all, and this really starts to frustrate Holden because he seems to want to only interview really smart criminals, not anyone who he would deem as inferior. But since he's there, Jim Barney actually asks some really good questions, and he manages to garner more information from these people than Holden actually thought there would be. So when Holden actually ends up going back to Quantico and they listen to the tapes, Wendy basically tells him, look, you switched off in that interview. You just didn't care about either of those interviews and you could have jeopardized this. But we got some really good information from these people, even though Holden basically states, well, they were stupid. They were idiots. Why would we even bother? We were surprised that they didn't get caught after the first murder, basically. Like, we didn't garner anything. But Smith, who is listening to the tapes as well, says, but we did. There were certain elements of the stories that they told where we now have to rethink certain elements of our stories. We always think that people will murder within their own ethnic group. Well, actually, we've just proved that they won't, and that potentially these murderers could kill outside of their own ethnic group. And since one of them did, Hance did, they say, well, what was the common denominator in that group? Why did Hance pick the woman that he originally picked? He's black and she's white. Why did he do it? And then they realise that the common denominator between the two of them is the fact that they were both in the services. So he wouldn't have seen colour of skin. He would only have ever seen the uniform. So he was just killing a woman. So it's interesting looking at the nuances of this and seeing how different beings are actually doing the things that they're doing. Because Holden was very dismissive of the both of them because he saw them as inferior when actually they are telling a real interesting story. The first one, for instance, reminded me a lot of Sam Rockwell in The Green Mile. He acted stupid, but actually he was, pretty intelligent for the criminal that he was. Just because he wasn't very articulate doesn't mean that he was stupid or had street smarts or anything. He obviously did bad things and didn't get away with it, but he did the bad things and continued to do the bad things until he was caught, so he's not that stupid. However, while he is in Atlanta, Holden meets the receptionist at his hotel. She essentially asks him to go to dinner with her. He thinks that it's a date and is happy to go with her. Obviously, since last season, Holden doesn't have a girlfriend anymore, so, why not? And he goes out on the town with her and thinks that he's just going to have a good dinner and a nice date. However, once he gets to his destination, he realizes he's been ambushed because there are 3 other women waiting for him, and these are 3 mothers of murdered children. They ask Holden for his help because they have no other answers now. They need to start profiling these killers that have done this thing to their babies, and he says he'll help. He says he'll look into it because they are just butting heads with the Georgia BI, which is the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. So they are just constantly clashing with these guys, but not getting anywhere. And so Holden says that he will go away and have a look at this. When he does, he ends up speaking to a guy who works for the GBI, and he tells him, look, these are all still open cases. We are still looking into these things. Just because the mothers think that they are linked doesn't mean that they are. The mothers obviously think that their babies have been killed because of their ethnic background, but the GBI are just treating them as single cases. So this isn't helpful to anyone right now, because if Holden can prove that there is a potential link between them, then maybe they can start narrowing down their search instead of looking at however many separate cases, at least 3 that we know of. But when Holden speaks to the receptionist and says, look, I've tried my best, the GBI are looking into this, she realizes that she's barking up the wrong tree with Holden and says, you evidently don't want to help us. So if you're not willing to help, then what's the point in even trying? We'll find out who did this in our own way, but you evidently don't want to help. And so Holden ends up going back to Quantico with his tail between his legs, and then once he gets there, he ends up with a slapped arse as well, because Wendy tells him, look, if it wasn't for Jim being there, you wouldn't have got anything out of the interviews. Essentially, he needs to pull his head out of his arse sometimes because he's getting in his own way. Now, what I find fascinating about this opening is the fact that it has just been done so well. Some of the interviews that they're doing and the characters that they're portraying are fascinating people. Getting the confession out of David Berkowitz that what he basically said was all bullshit and that he knew what he was doing. It wasn't a demon inside him. He killed those people because, well, he just could. And the fact that he managed to con several psychiatrists and the judge and everyone, he was such a master manipulator. And it's interesting to see how they're going to actually incorporate what they do to that kind of personality. But then again, the same with the last 2 interviews. They were both frustrating to listen to because of the way that they were. They didn't seem very intelligent, but again, they did multiple murders and got away with it. So they were obviously doing something right and very, very wrong, but something right in some ways to be able to do such wrong. But yeah, the show just keeps shocking you more and more. The fact that they have shown this crucifix on the floor in the last episode really shocked me. I totally forgot about what was going on, and seeing that again was horrendous. Just the iconography of it all was really jarring, but really well done, really well told. You feel the tension throughout the whole show. But finally, in the last episode, or in the last 3 episodes, I suppose, because Wendy and Holden went to a bar first, and then Wendy went with Bill to the same bar. And as she was talking, she kept eyeing up the barmaid. Let's not forget, she is a closeted gay woman. And then towards the end of the last episode, she actually went on her own and managed to strike up a conversation with this woman. And it seems like they're going to go out on a date now. So it seems like Wendy's story is really starting to develop a bit more now after the last season when she ended up leaving her girlfriend, wife, I can't remember what it was, and coming to Quantico to actually do the things that she's doing now. She gave up a lot to be in the position that she's in, and now finally she's actually getting a social life out of it, which is really good to see. Holden, it seems, is just driven towards whatever he is doing. The storyline that he is currently in, he doesn't seem to have any outside interference, no outside private life, whereas in the last season it was all about his external life. And then Bill, you can obviously see that the family man of him is coming through a lot, and this is going to be a tough case for him to look into because obviously he has his adopted son, and a baby being killed in that area is just abhorrent. It's such a family orientated area that now people, and they even state it in the show, that their kids are scared to go out even into the backyard to play because they don't know what's going to come out of the shadows at them. But I think it's a really solid start to this series, and this show is just stellar. It should have been commissioned for a third season. I know it's Netflix and, you know, they only tend to do 3 seasons, but we didn't even get 3 out of this. I always thought we did, because the amount of time that I know that rule of 3 with Netflix, I always thought we got 3 seasons out of this, and then I was shocked to learn that we didn't. And I hope we do. I really do, because this is fucking excellent. This should have definitely got a third season, even after the pandemic. The guys who were in it wanted it, so give us it. Like, just fucking do it. Do that, do Hannibal, go fuck yourself. And yeah, I love these shows so much, and they're very intellectual shows. They make you think. They don't just give you a black and white answer, and I love that. Anyway, I'm done rambling. I am going to go, but thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye. As always, thank you for listening to this podcast, and you could really help me and the podcast by giving a like, share, subscribe on all major platforms that you listen to podcasts on. As an independent podcaster, this will just help me exponentially when it comes to actually doing more things with this podcast. I truly do enjoy this, and I absolutely love revisiting these TV shows with you guys. So any engagement from you is always welcome, and I will try and listen to all of you when you give suggestions or just tell me what you think about the podcast. But once again, thank you for listening, and until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye.